Hello again guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're back for another aircraft review, this time with the FlyInside Bell 47G. The Bell 47 obviously recently released for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and of course it's our first payware rotary aircraft available in the sim. So I thought it would be really interesting to give it a go, as supposedly the sim doesn't support any form of rotary aerodynamics at the moment. As we know though, this is ultimately possible as we have the freeware H135, and apparently FlyInside have managed to pull off the same feat by creating a custom flight model for the aircraft. I have to say that this is a product I was very excited to try out, as I do really enjoy rotary aircraft flying within the sim, and particularly within Microsoft Flight Simulator, rotary aircraft are a really good opportunity to take in all of the excellent scenery that we have available to us. Anyway, FlyInside were nice enough to provide me with a copy of the Bell 47, but as always I'll try and be as objective as possible with the review. One thing I will say before we get the review underway, we do get off to a slightly shaky start when it comes to reviewing the Bell 47 from FlyInside, but overall I think the product is absolutely excellent, really one of the best available currently for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So if you don't feel like sticking around for the entire review, I strongly recommend that you at least watch the conclusion at the end of the video, as there we'll run through all of the good and the bad points regarding the FlyInside Bell 47, and I'll try and explain to you why I think it's one of the best products that you could currently purchase for the sim. In today's video we'll be making a very quick hop from the Ile D'Oleron on the western coast of France out towards Fort Boyard. Many of you may be familiar with Fort Boyard from the eponymous TV show. I thought that the flight would give us a nice brief but hopefully very interesting trip, and it should give us a great opportunity as well to try and put the Bell 47 down on the pad at the fortifications. Anyway guys, as always I do hope you enjoy the video and find it to be of use. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, you can leave those down in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. We'll now continue with our external tour of the Bell 47G before getting ourselves sat down in the cockpit and getting the flight underway. So starting with the external model of the aircraft then, and as you can see overall FlyInside have done a very nice job with the Bell 47G. Really from every angle in terms of the modelling the aircraft looks to be quite correct. Certainly all of the proportions and the major details of the aircraft look to be in the correct order and place. And as far as the modelling goes, as you can see the detail is very nice throughout the external model of the aircraft. As you can see for yourselves though, I think it's fair to say that the texturing is sadly not quite up to the same standards as the modelling. The modelling seems to be very exact, whereas the texturing seems to have slightly more of a cartoonish look to my eye, and certainly isn't up there with some of the best that we've seen in the sim to date. This really carries on throughout the entire external model of the aircraft. Again, as you can see when we zoom right in towards the engine and the rotor hub, the modelling detail is really nice, but the texturing detail is a little bit bland, a little bit basic, and again has a slightly cartoonish feel to it. Overall though, I will say that the textures are adequate, and certainly when viewed from a distance, the aircraft does still look rather nice. There are a couple of external modelling issues with the aircraft, namely being caused by the 3D pilot models. Firstly, and I don't know if this can be adjusted by FlyInside or whether this is a Microsoft Flight Simulator issue, but the pilot models seem to be synchronised in terms of their movement, which does look a little bit odd and does tend to break the immersion a little bit when viewing the aircraft from outside. And secondly, as you may have noticed already, the pilot models are sat in rather a strange position, i.e. their feet aren't really on the torque pedals, they're sort of extended out into space, and they do clip slightly through the cockpit windshield as well. So overall, as far as the external model of the aircraft goes, I would say that it's good. There are a few areas that could be improved, namely the texturing and the pilot models as we've just discussed. But again, I think that the Bell 47G looks pretty accurate and certainly from a distance actually looks rather nice. Coming now into the cockpit then, and again I would say it's really the same situation internally as we saw externally. For the most part the cockpit does look good, but again there are some textures that I think look rather cartoonish. In particular, as you can see, the mixture control and the carb heat control. The handles on those fairly basic in terms of texturing, and it does look rather unrealistic. The main instrument panel though I think looks really rather nice, and of course when you are focused in the cockpit this will be getting most of your attention anyway. As you might expect, some of the more hidden away areas of the cockpit are fairly basic in terms of their modelling and their texturing, The cockpit is a bit of a mix in that some of the textures look really nice, and some of them don't quite hold up so well by modern standards. But I will say I don't think this has anything to do with a lack of attention to detail, as everything is fairly meticulously modelled and textured. There's no texture bleed or out of place textures. Nothing has been modelled poorly per se. Again, it's really just a case of the textures looking a little bit too immaculate for my liking, and giving the aircraft rather an artificial feel. Once again though, although the textures aren't entirely to my liking, I think that the cockpit overall is still very nice. It is very functional, and overall everything seems to be modelled, everything seems to work correctly. And as you can see, the visibility is absolutely excellent, so the amount of time you'll actually spend looking inside the cockpit is fairly minimal. Lastly, it's certainly worthy of mention that the FlyInside Bell 47G comes with a program called Heli Manager. This allows you to customise your experience in multiple different ways. And more importantly still, we can actually customise the realism of the helicopter itself, which I think is a really great feature. We'll talk more about it later on, but of course it's very beneficial for anybody new to rotary aircraft within the sim. As you can see for yourselves, there's also various other options that we can adjust. For example, we can enable an unrealistic but certainly very helpful auto governor. This is ideal for people using an ordinary HOTAS, as controlling the aircraft otherwise can become a little bit tricky. Similarly, we can enable or disable engine failures, and finally we can adjust various sensitivity and stability options of the aircraft. The Heli Manager and indeed the options that it provides are really nice to see. It makes the helicopter far more accessible to beginners, and also means that you can adjust the options to train yourself right through to becoming a proficient rotary aircraft pilot within the sim. Anyway, we'll get ourselves sat down in the Bell 47G. Rather unusually, the aircraft is generally flown from the left seat. We'll run through the usual checklists and get ourselves up in the air, as that's where the FlyInside Bell 47G really shines, and in my opinion goes from being a decent product to one of, if not the best product currently available for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So welcome to the cockpit of the FlyInside Bell 47G. As you can see, it's still fairly early morning here on the Ile D'Oleron. The aircraft's pretty straightforward to get started up, so we'll run through the checklists and we'll make our way out towards Fort Boyard. So the pre-flight checklist is complete, seatbelts are secure, ignition is off, collective, we have full free motion there, and the cyclic, we have the same. For the start checklist then, the mixture can go to the rich position, carpet is in the cold position, circuit breakers are checked in, battery is on, alternator is on, gauges are checked, rotor area is clear, collective is down, throttle is closed. We'll be using the auto governor for today's flight. Nav lights can come on, as can the beacon. Ignition can go to both. And we'll engage the starter. As you can hear, really nice engine sounds I think from the aircraft, and the same will go later on, you'll hear the rotor sounds. As far as the engine and the rotor sounds go, I think the Bell 47G is really good. Anyway, oil pressure coming up into the green, waiting for the rotor and the engine RPM to stabilise. And they are both now in the green. Manifold pressure's come back to 14 inches manifold pressure. After start checklist, instruments are on, avionics are on, cylinder head temperature, we're looking for above 50 degrees Celsius, we've got just coming up on 100 degrees Celsius now. Rotor RPM is checked, nav light is on, strobe light can come on, and we get the landing light on as well. Transponder is set, and we'll tune up traffic, frequency is 120.2. So the wind's out from the north-northeast, so we'll take runway 10, and we'll be departing out to the east.
Lima Foxtrot Delta Papa Traffic Golf, India Tango Bravo Sierra taking off runway 10 right departure to the east.
Okay, we'll just hover taxi our way over to the holding point and we'll depart straight out off runway 10. So feeding in some anti-torque, slowly coming up on the collective. And we're up. So just reducing the anti-torque there will let the aircraft swing out to the right. There's the taxiway, as you can see, just off at our 12 o'clock. And the aircraft is a real handful in the hover. It's certainly a really nice challenge, just as it should be. Particularly using a typical HOTAS as well, not really designed for this sort of flying, as the fact that the joystick always wants to return to centre and you're constantly fighting some control force there is not really very ideal for rotary aircraft flying. Anyway, just swinging ourselves around to get lined up with runway 10. We'll depart straight out, so coming up on the collective, go for around 22 inches on the manifold pressure. And just keeping the aircraft's nose down, building up some airspeed, gaining some transitional lift. As the speed increases, we can start reducing the pressure on the anti-torque pedals, or the rudder pedals. As you can see, I'm really having to juggle the controls rather an awful lot, just to keep the aircraft exactly where I want it. Gaining some airspeed now. We should reach an airspeed for around 70 knots at 22 inches manifold pressure. As you can see, a really beautiful sunrise just off to the east. And we can pretty much follow the direction of the sunrise off towards Fort Boyard. As you can see, the Bell 47 is certainly not an aircraft you want to pick up if you want to get from A to B in a hurry, but it really is an excellent aircraft for taking in the scenery and the sim. If you like your low and slow flying and enjoying everything that Microsoft Flight Simulator has to offer, then I think the Bell 47 is a really excellent option. Visibility as well, as you can see, absolutely excellent. And as you can see, maintaining around 70 knots there in the cruise. The fort just off at our 11 o'clock currently. I did do a little bit of reading about Fort Boyard before the flight, and it's rather interesting. The fort was actually constructed at the start of the 1800s by Napoleon. Apparently it was considered many years before, but it was always deemed to be too costly and too complex to build. And essentially the fort was built to plug a hole in the coastal defences. At the time, the artillery range was not sufficient to cover the entire coast with the current fortifications that they had. So the fort was constructed. It took around 50 years to build. Unfortunately though, by the time the fort was complete, artillery had come on a long way, and by then available artillery range was actually such that the gap was already plugged by the existing fortifications. So the fort was somewhat redundant in the end, but it did survive, and to this day it still exists. As I'm sure many of you may have seen, it was used in the Fort Boyard TV show. Overall though, the aircraft is really excellent in terms of its handling. It feels pretty much spot on to me. I've never flown the Bell 47 in the real world, of course, and I've never actually flown a rotary aircraft in the real world. I've flown one in a full level D sim, but that's about it. Something I would definitely like to try at some point, but Anyway, compared to that and compared to some of the best choppers that I've flown in various simulators, particularly the DCS Huey, that really springs to mind. I think the FlyInside Bell 47 is really excellent. The aircraft behaves exactly as you would expect. As I say, it's a real handful, which does tend to be the case with light helicopters. And all of the various control complexities that you have, basically having to juggle all three controls at once. When you input one control, you have to counteract with the others. All of that exists with the aircraft. Anyway, a beautiful morning here on the western coast of France, as you can see. We'll come off the manifold pressure here a little bit, we'll lose a little bit of altitude. We'll do at least one lap around the fort just to take in some of the scenery, and then we'll come back for an approach. The wind is currently out from the north-northeast, so we'll aim to come in from the south. And again, as you can hear, the sounds as well, really rather excellent. You'll notice when we make our turns around the fort as well, the rotor blade sounds are really, really top notch. Making sure to keep that speed up for now as we descend. So this is Fort Boyard. Yeah, so the fort itself is a stadium layout of multiple levels, as you can see. I believe the fort was crewed by around 200 men. They generally lived on the lower levels, and then of course you had the gun batteries on the upper levels. I presume that is a water tower out to the south, and looks like a perhaps more modern jetty arrangement there as well, off on the western side of the fort. Anyway, we'll do one more loop around. Sure, again, many of you will recognise the fort from the TV show. And that little wooden platform that's just passing down now at our 9 o'clock, we'll aim to land right there. So we'll head out back towards the south, and we'll come in for an approach, as I say, into winds. Rotary aircraft are particularly susceptible to crosswinds, and particularly tailwinds, so very important to make sure that we minimise any of that. Anyway, we'll track back out towards the south for a moment and come back in to make our approach. But again, as you'll see from the cyclic, having to make continuous minor corrections, still got quite a bit of pressure on the anti-torque pedals here as well to keep us flying straight. So certainly if you want to fly the aircraft in realistic mode, then I would advise it's probably necessary to have some previous rotary aircraft experience in the sim. So just heading back towards the fort, we have a really rather beautiful sunrise off in the east there. Maintaining around 20 knots at the moment and keeping a really good eye on that vertical speed there. That's what we really need to watch out for to make sure we avoid entering into our own ring vortex. Just keep bleeding off that airspeed, making our approach really nice and slowly, giving us plenty of time to get the helicopter exactly where we want it. So coming off the collective, altitude's pretty good now, so we'll maintain our current altitude. Again, a lot of coordination needed here. It's a really good challenge, really good fun, requiring all of my concentration here at the moment. Just inch towards the platform, make sure we don't have too much drift or airspeed on when we touch down. And there we go. Get the aircraft shut down, and then, as I say, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the aerodynamics options and the flight modelling. So the securing checklist: throttle is closed, ignition can come off, mixture can go to lean, lights are off, instruments off, alternator can come off, and the battery can come off. And that is the securing checklist complete. So as I say, we'll now take the opportunity to briefly look at the aircraft's flight model. We'll discuss a little bit more about the handling characteristics with the normal and the easy difficulty settings, and then we'll wrap up with my overall thoughts on the FlyInside Bell 47G. So the first thing we'll demonstrate is an engine failure and then an auto rotation to landing. To induce the engine failure, we've turned off the automatic governor here. We've brought the throttle all the way up to full and the collective all the way down. As you can see, this will overspeed the engine and ultimately lead to an engine failure. As soon as the engine fails, we'll pitch the nose down to keep the airspeed. We don't have to dump the collective as we've already got that all the way down. And as we're near the ground, coming back on the stick, feeding in the collective, easing our descent rate. Touching down, not particularly pretty, but good enough given the situation. So as you can see for yourselves, the aircraft does a pretty good job of modelling both engine failure and auto rotation. Next we'll take a quick look at retreating blade stall. So we're back in the cruise and currently doing a fairly normal cruising speed. We'll come up on the power though and pitch the nose down to build up some more airspeed. You'll see the airspeed creeping up and we're about to approach VNE. And as soon as we pass through that VNE speed, you'll see that the FlyInside Bell 47 will fairly quickly snap to the right, simulating the retreating blade stall, and will end up in a pretty violent spin to the right towards the ground. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our quick trip out in the FlyInside Bell 47G. I know I certainly did, and as I say, I think it is one of the best products that I've tried in the sim to date. Certainly in terms of the flight modelling, it's absolutely head and shoulders above anything else that I've tried in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But anyway, we'll now run through the positives and the negatives of the product. As usual, we'll start with the negatives and work our way through to the positives. So as we've already discussed, I think the weakest area of the product at the moment is the texturing. Again, it's not bad by any means, it's perfectly adequate, but by modern standards, and certainly by Microsoft Flight Simulator standards, it is a little bit uniform, a little bit basic. And I think, particularly given that the aircraft is modelled to rather a high standard, the textures I feel hold the aircraft back a little bit. Overall though, personally I'm happy to let this slide, as I do think that the positives of the aircraft far outweigh the negatives. Overall it is a really excellent product. But again, for your attention, and I suppose the attention of the developers as well, it would be really nice in the future to see a more comprehensive, weathered and generally more detailed texture set. That's really my only major gripe with the product, though the rest of my negative points are somewhat trivial in nature, although I still think it would be nice to see them addressed. So firstly, the Heli Manager application, whilst excellent and having some really nice options, it does seem to automatically start up when I start my computer, and I can't see an option to adjust that. Personally, I don't like apps that automatically start up without your permission. Again, really a texturing and modelling issue, but I'd certainly like to see the pilot models sorted out there, such that they sit more naturally in the cockpit and there's no clipping through the canopy itself. It's worth noting that much like the Aerosoft CRJ, the first time that you load the aircraft up will take around 5 to 10 minutes. On my machine though, it was certainly no more than 5 minutes, and this will only happen on the first time that you load the aircraft. The cockpit doors, a little bit disappointingly, are inoperable currently. Again, it would be nice to see those fixed at a later date. And there also didn't seem to be an aircraft option to have the doors removed, which in the Bell 47 I do think is a little bit of a shame. Lastly, and it's by no means the fault of the developers, but trying to fly any helicopter that's as accurate as this using a typical HOTAS can be quite a tricky task. So just be aware that that will be the case, and you may have to dial down the realism settings a little bit to make life a little bit easier for yourself. Overall though, that just about wraps it up for my negative points of the aircraft. Obviously we do have a freeware helicopter available to us in the sim, and so the FlyInside Bell 47 certainly needs to have some reasons to justify its $35 price tag compared to a freeware product. But for me, without a question, the FlyInside Bell 47G is absolutely worth every dollar. Aside from the negatives that we've already mentioned, I think the product is really excellent. Whilst it is a little bit below par when it comes to the texturing, it's head and tails above anything else I've seen in Microsoft Flight Simulator to date when it comes to the flight modelling. I think the sounds are generally excellent as well. And above all else, the aircraft is just really great fun. Anyway, to break down the positives into a little bit more detail, as I say, the custom flight model is really top notch. Again, I don't have any personal real world experience with rotary aircraft, but certainly from the little I've seen in real world simulators, and from my experience in other rotary aircraft in other sims, the FlyInside Bell G47 stacks up very well, being one of the best rotary aircraft that I've seen in any sim to date. This does mean that the aircraft is a real handful, as we've mentioned, and you might find that initially you'll want to dial back the difficulty settings if you're not that familiar with rotary aircraft operations. But again, it's really nice to see that we do have those custom difficulty options, and it actually makes the Bell 47 a really good option for anyone that's looking to get into rotary aircraft within flight simulation. If you're new, it means that you have the ability to start off on the easy mode and work your way through to the realistic mode. There are significant differences between all three, and I think that they've been balanced out very well, such that in the easy mode the helicopter is very easy to handle. Medium does provide a nice challenge, and as we've said, realistic is a real handful. The sounds, as I mentioned, I think are absolutely excellent. Again, some of the best that I've seen in the sim to date. I would like to see some of the cockpit switch sounds improved a little bit. I found them to be quite quiet and a little bit uninspiring. But as far as the engine sounds go and the rotor blade sounds, they're really, really nice. Certainly creating a real feeling of immersion when flying the helicopter. Lastly, it's really nice to see that we do have the various aerodynamics peculiarities of helicopter flight modelled. So for example, as we've seen, we can auto-rotate the helicopter to a landing. We saw the retreating blade stall there as well. The only area that I found the helicopter didn't really live up to its description. I couldn't seem to get the Bell 47 to enter into VRS. Again, I wouldn't consider myself an expert when it comes to rotary aircraft, but certainly based on the DCS HUI, I know what to look for and I know how to induce it. And despite my best efforts, I couldn't get a VRS out of the Bell 47 at all. So that may be an error on my part, that may be true to the real world Bell 47, or that may just be an area of the aircraft that still needs a little bit more work. Overall though, despite the few shortfalls that we've mentioned, I think that the product feels very complete. That custom flight model for me just makes it worth, as I say, absolutely every penny that FlyInside are charging. And again, it really helps to move Microsoft Flight Simulator in the right direction, having an aircraft in the sim that, at least to my understanding, has a really accurate, really nice high fidelity flight model. So if you can look past the texturing, and I truly believe that you should, I think that the Bell 47G from FlyInside is well worth a look. It's one of the most impressive products that I've come across in the sim to date. And as I say, it's just absolutely great fun as well. It's a really good way of exploring all of the brilliant scenery that we have in the sim. Lastly, I would just like to thank FlyInside for letting me test the aircraft. Very kind of them to do so, and I think we've been fair and done it justice throughout the review. Anyway guys, as always, I do hope you enjoyed the video and found it to be of use. If you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you have any comments or questions for me, please leave those down in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, thank you very much, and I'll see you all again soon.